All
Hey,
you,
welcome to
Uncle.
Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout, to our show, Issues and Challenges of Today's Fire Service. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good friend from his command vehicle car at the testing site for Louisville Fire Department. Assistant Chief Terry McGrath is out there supervising, watching over. We'll talk to Terry in a second about their new hire process. And as usual, we got our pretty much all of our regular cast. We've got Chief Bobby Halton, we got Chief Scott Thompson, and Chief John Salka should be, I think he's on a run, should be able to join us in a little bit if we can get him. We've got another great one for you today with like I said, our Humpday team and cast of characters. We always say this at the beginning before I forget it as a reminder. If you have any comments, head over to what we're following social media wise, and whether it's Twitter or Parler, just make sure you add hashtag FE Talk for Fire Engineering Talk, and we'll get to as many of your questions as possible. Today, actually, before I get to our topic, I want to do a couple quick things. One is little hats off, and guys, I think you'll echo this, to the city of Lubbock, Texas. January 11th, 2020, Lubbock was daytime. They had an accident at Vienna Highway, and they got obliterated on the scene. One of their police officers and one of their firefighters was killed. Another firefighter, Matt Dawson, was critically injured, and he is still rehabbing. And very cool story. I know I posted it. I think Fire Engineering, our friend Pete, our producer, posted it. I think Billy G did, that the city of Lubbock has extended his benefits and doing everything they can to take care of him. They actually sent him to Colorado for rehab. So hats off to a city that cares about their employees. And I know that's not just the firefighters and police officers in Lubbock. The city of Lubbock takes care of all their people. So that's pretty cool. I also, and Bobby, we were talking about this before going on about our good friend John Salka being the chief of South Blooming Grove, the fire department is a volley, and Bobby's a volunteer, and I'm a volunteer at the Wichita West Volunteer Fire Department here in Texas. Little congratulations. They had their annual awards banquet dinner the other night, and the rookie of the year, this is kind of funny, and Bobby, you've been there. The rookie of the year is a guy named Ed Moore. Ed has 25 plus years. He's now retired recently with the Cary, North Carolina Fire Department, about 250 member fire department. He got on as a volley, and Ed's awesome. Ed's awesome. He did a great job. He's done a great job teaching some classes. One of these volunteers, that comes from a career department that's helping share his experiences. Like I said, well over 25 years with Cary, North Carolina. So Ed Moore was congratulations. Ed was rookie of the year, and the firefighter of the year was Michael Albert. Michael is actually the assistant chief. Used to be on Double Oak, Scott, with Brandon Thetford and all them, and he's the owner of Service Master out here, and another great guy and a great officer. So two really good guys. Congratulations to Ed Moore, rookie of the year, and Michael Albert, assistant chief Michael Albert, on firefighter of the year. So hats off, Wichita West. Chief Fetzer, thank you again for everything you do. And lastly, Bobby, this goes along coincidentally with our topic today. Before I announce our topic again, good friend of mine, and Scott, I don't know if you met her or not, Sarah LaPaca, Dr. Sarah LaPaca, used to live in Trophy Club. I was interim. Scott, I met her. We had
Okay, so I got to ask, is she a MD doctor or a...
Hang on, I'm getting there, buddy, because you'll appreciate this. So that being said, I did a little quick talk for the Citizens Police Fire Academy. They're alumni. They do rehab and all that stuff. And I go to give business cards, and she hands me her business card. And I look at this, and she goes, yeah, she goes, I work, she's forever. She's one working with, she's friends with Sarah Janke, all these people. Anyway, she's the real thing. And I just want to throw a little congratulations out to her, because yesterday she announced, coincidentally, right after I posted this, but she announced that she just got hired as the San Antonio Police Department staff psychologist. Bobby, she's the real deal. She's got the background. She's done great stuff. I've been with her several times. She's very passionate about helping those she's worked with for years in the armed forces and police and fire. So it's pretty cool. And San Antonio's pretty progressive police department. So that being said, if hopefully you better be following Fire Engineering, the magazine, whether you get the hard copy, the digital copy, which is awesome, or you go online. You couldn't have missed, whether it's Bill Carey, our friend at Firefighter Nation, anybody putting out, I know I retweeted it and sent it out a bunch of times, Chief Halton's editorial opinion that he put out, came out the other day. Sorry, one quick thing, Bobby. shout out to Chief Gordon Nord, another great magazine shop for fire engineering. So Gordy, great job, buddy, with the truck company from there. It is. Scott, hold it up there. Is that 48 truck? What is that? Oh, you're muted, buddy.
Scott, I'm sorry, that was the November one.
Okay. All right. So I think it's 48 truck, regardless, yeah. But I know among other people, Bobby, that contribute to the magazine, Gordon's been one for you for years.
And Timmy Olk as the cover on the supplement.
And I was just getting to that, Timmy Olk. So two of our many favorite photographers doing a great job. But anyway, so Chief Halton, for our listeners, wrote an editorial, an editor's opinion, if you will, titled "Stay in Your Lane." And I read it obviously right away, and I called, like I said, John must be on a run. I called John, and he goes, "I just read it. How many times have we talked about this? This is so right on." And blah, blah. He goes, "We had to do it. We had to do the show on this." I said, "I know. I'm getting ready to call Bobby, And I said, I called Terry. Carrie, what do you think about us doing this?" So anyway, let's talk about Bobby. Yeah, first of all, I guess let's back up. I know you and I've had this conversation multiple times about staying in your lane on a variety of topics. A couple of things I noted before we went on the air here. Your thought process, for starters, behind the topic, why you wrote it. And I guess explain it for those that may not have read the piece yet.
Well, two things. If I could take some artistic leisure here, or what is it called? Literary license. A little shout out also to the Lubbock Fire Department, because Lubbock's not only taking care of its people, but they're also investing heavily into health and wellness and physical fitness right now in Lubbock, where they're making some really intelligent purchases of some high-end equipment, good equipment. And so a couple of the Lubbock folks reached out to me about that, and couldn't, what a great group of men and women, what a super place to work, obviously.
Well, they run a really good fire school too, Bobby, for that area. Terry, Scott, you're familiar. We both taught with Scott. I know you've taught out there. Very progressive. I mean, they're kind of West Texas, Texas Tech, home of Texas Tech. Go Raiders, right? And but they do. And there's a lot, Bobby, a lot of these volunteer departments out there can't afford, this is it's a great opportunity. So anyway, Lubbock does a great job with their programs too. But go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. So a couple of, maybe over a year ago, a buddy reached out, Jim Bernica, who does a thing, fire cancer consultants, but he runs a program called Brothers Helping Brothers. Have you taught there, Ricky?
Yes.
He does an annual deal. And so he said, "Hey, would you mind coming out and doing a keynote for us?"
We had him on this show, Bobby.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
You and I did.
I did. Okay. I'm having a Joe Biden moment. I'm sorry. It happens to guys our age. So I got my Ray-Bans. I could put them on if that would help. So anyway, is there a doctor in the house? Somebody with a PhD? I'm feeling ill. The jokes write themselves. I'm sorry. So anyway, Jim asked me to come talk, and he runs this thing called Fire Consultants and Brothers Helping Brothers, and great conference. They raise money to do, support things for their folks, and help, start peer support groups, get training out there. And so anyway, I was more than happy to go. And so I wrote a talk for them just for that conference, and about how important it is that we have peer support groups, that we have Al-Anon, AA, all of those things. And I really think those are critical things, obviously, and as important as having a good sense of humor. And so the theme became how important it is for us to stay within our realm of expertise. And I used a few examples, obviously, from history, where people strayed outside of their lane, right? And the problem with straying is that we all know a little bit about something. Thomas Jefferson once said the most dangerous man in the world is the guy who's read one book, right? And they think that that's the answer to everything. Answers are very nuanced and complex. And especially when we're talking about things like mental health and cancer and issues like that, right? Where alcoholism and other diseases of the mind and the spirit and then of the body. They're very complex. That's why doctors call it practicing medicine. You know, a medicine that might work really well for me might not work at all for Scott or Rick. And that's why medicines today in the cancer field are actually tailored to specific people. And then there's medicines that you take that are generically good and have effect. But we've all heard about people having allergic reactions. Right now in the UK, the health ministry just put out a special warning that they actually have resuscitation sites available for folks taking the vaccines right now, in case someone who has a history of allergies and reactions has a really bad reaction. And that's good, irrespective of what the testing has shown. And by the way, in the tests in the UK, they didn't have people with severe reactions and allergies in the test group. So anyway, that's why it's so important to stay in your lane, right? The people who know medicine know that irrespective of what the general testing may have shown, there's always going to be that person or persons or bunches of persons that might not react well to a medicine or may have exactly the opposite reaction to it. That's why in psychology, they have there's people who are behavioralists. There are people who believe in hypnosis. There's people who do light therapy. There's people who do all kinds of stuff. And I don't know anything about it. So I'm just making stuff up. So I apologize in advance. But that was kind of the point of the editorial, and the point of the talk that I gave. And this is just a small, obviously, you can read it in 4 minutes, and the talk was 20 minutes. So it's part of a bigger talk. But the point of the talk was we need peer support groups. We need cancer support groups. We need networks for men and women that are going through this stuff in our industry, because the minute you get sick, and I can say this from experience, the first thing you do is you tell the people closest to you. You tell your wife, and then you tell your best friends. And the reason you do that is you want reassurance. You want to have support. And that's why it's called the Cancer Support Network. It's not called the Cancer Treatment Network. That's a whole other industry. So the whole idea was to remind us that, and God's a great guy, and he's given us a lot of wonderful things, right? Life and this beautiful planet and this great universe and all kinds of good stuff. But in the planning section, the guy who was working for God that day forgot to put the rumble strips in our social circles to remind us of when we're getting out of our lane, right? And I'm a car guy. So the rumble strips are those things that, when you doze off a little and it reminds you that you're drifting, because nobody in this group would actually ever look at their cell phone while they were driving.
No,
So,
and I use it just to knock the stones out of my tires. So keep
yeah,
going.
exactly. I do it to make sure that my wife is awake. So anyway, so the problem becomes is that, and we've learned it over the last few months, experts can be absolutely wrong. They can be completely wrong. And if you've been watching the whole COVID thing, don't wear masks, wear masks, do this, don't do that. And now there's the Great Barrington Declaration, where they've got over, I think it's like 60,000 doctors and epidemiologists around the world now who are saying shutdowns are a lousy idea. If you're young and healthy, go live your life. If you're vulnerable or potentially, vulnerable, don't, protect yourself. So among the brightest minds in the medical world, there are completely different opinions on what is best practice and what is the right thing to do. It's like the fire service, smoothbore fog, tastes great, less filling. I mean, it's so the point of the whole exercise was, it's okay to have an opinion. It's okay to be supportive. It's important to be supportive. It's necessary to the human condition to be supportive. But where we have to be careful is, just because it worked for you doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else. And so recommending treatment or saying, oh, you've got this, you know what I mean? It's like, I know these people who like, that they get some kind of symptoms and they go on the internet and they say, oh, I've got googly disease. You know what I mean? And I'm like, Okay, how do you know that? Well, I went online, I got all the symptoms. Well, those symptoms can also be boogly disease and moogly disease and jubilee disease. You know, that the doctor who has themselves for a patient has a fool for a patient, right? Doctors don't treat themselves. Docs don't do that. You know what I mean? They go and ask another doc, hey, what have I got? You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that the other doc is right. So yeah, Peter says it's the perils of self-diagnosis, right? And we can scare the poop out of ourselves too. You know what I mean?
Well,
you know,
and Bobby, real quick, there's a comedian that I listen to. I listen to a bunch of that one comedy channel, and he says, his wife, he's so tired of her going to the web because the website she goes to, everything she searches, you have cancer. Well, my heel is hurting a little bit. Well, you may have ankle cancer. Well, my knee was hurt. Well, you may have kneecap cancer. And it's just everything. He goes,
And full disclosure here, seriously, if you're having issues with your prostate as a man, or if you feel a lump as a woman or even a man, get it checked out, because you could have just what's called benign prostate hypothesis. I'm going to say it wrong, but anyway, just some normal swelling, or it could be prostate cancer. So we're not saying don't check it out if you have a symptom. We're saying have it checked out by a doctor.
Well, and Bobby, real quick, you know where Granbury is? Granbury, Texas. Our friend Homer Robertson, one of the assistant chiefs in Fort Worth, is out there. I did a keynote at a fundraiser at their banquet for one of their guys who had passed away. His wife did the puppet show for the pub ed and all that stuff. They were out on a brush fire. Scott, you may remember this, and Terry. He was out on a brush fire, came back, and when they found him, he was at his computer and he had Googled chest pains. Now, I'm not going to say, I'm like, God bless him. He's a great guy. And Granbury's a great fire department. But I'm sitting there going, God, if, I as a reminder to Rick, if I ever have chest pains, I need to just call the fire department or go to the get to the hospital instead of, I'm like, what a great, like I said, tragic loss for the Granbury Volunteer Fire Department. But, could you imagine, that's, and like you said, it's like, if you think you got a problem, go get checked.
So, yeah, I mean, but denial, which ain't a river in Egypt, denial is the first symptom, right? The medics can back me up on that. Like the minute somebody starts having chest pain, oh man, it's got to just be indigestion. It must have been something you're right. Am I right, Terry? I mean, that's like the deal. So
I always think it's funny because everything that we preach on a call, when you're talking to a patient and they tell you, I don't want to go to the hospital. It's going to be expensive. I think this will go away. And we're like, oh, no, ma'am. You need to go. None of that applies to us. No. None of it.
Oh, no.
Because we're not sick like that, or we don't have what that person had. Yeah. No, that is probably a universal across from coast to coast in this country.
It's funny, Terry, you bring that up. I wish Salka was with us right now. I hope he gets in to make the show. But that's why they hire Marines at 18, because you're invincible. You're Captain America, right, Scotty? I mean, when you joined the Louisville Fire Department as a 19-year-old kid, you were bulletproof, right?
Oh yeah, I wear these guys out now because I am my father. Like, hey, don't run with scissors. That's too hot. Where's your glasses? How much does that cost? Oh yeah. No, it's life has come full circle.
Close the door. Are we heating the outside?
I'm your grandfather. That's what's really, and it's great. I mean, and trust me, getting old is awesome. It should be everyone's goal. Everyone's goal should be to be old and in the way. I mean, it's just because it's wonderful. You know what I mean?
Bobby, one of the things when you talk about the stay in your lane thing, and about, I know there's a couple of areas you want to get to. One of the areas you and I have talked about many times is, I've had the privilege and honor since '96 of serving on the FDIC advisory board and reviewing the article, the submissions for you every year, being part of the advisory board meeting and picking the classes, helping to pick the classes, like giving recommendations for you and Diane and Ginger and stuff to do what you do. And I know I've told you before, and I actually put it down. When I see someone submit a class and they want, Scott, you and I were talking about this before we went live, they want to teach a class on being a company officer, yet they're not a company officer, or they want to teach a class about chiefs, so they're never been a chief. I talk about, I go, and John and I had this talk yesterday, and he said the same thing. He goes, I would never, ever try to teach a class. And not only was I not familiar with it, I was like over the top familiar with. And sometimes I'm like, I look at their bio, I go, but maybe I'm missing something, but they really shouldn't probably be teaching this particular topic. Again, if you haven't ridden a seat, if you've never been the chief of the department, if you've never been to that hazmat, and I'll say this, Bob, before I turn it back over, all the years I was teaching hazmat, there were times when you're teaching responses to nuclear stuff, which is a part you have to teach for responders. A lot of the instructors have never done that. So what do? For that particular area, you get every bit of information into your noggin that you can, so you can at least teach the subject along with all the other things that you hopefully have been to. But again, the stay in the lane, not just with, I know where you're going with this because we've talked about it, with the advice people are giving to people just because they put a PowerPoint together. Same, whether it's, if you've never ridden the front seat, then please don't submit an article or a class that you want to teach a class. I'm going to come officer if you've never done it. It's just because Scott and I go to a class at, Teeks has great training, right? Scott and Terry, Teeks has great training. Bobby, you've taught for a bunch of times, but let's say we go there and we listen to somebody do a class on, PTSD, and stuff like that. And then we go back to Chief Halton, our fire chief, say, Chief, Scott and I, we went to this. It was a great class. This guy taught it. Or this gal taught it. We want to put something together for our department, an awareness thing to say, look, let's go over how we use our EAP and let's get HR involved. And, kind of none of us claiming to be diagnosing people and stuff like that. And then, Bobby, right, you see a couple of these people go, hey, Scott, why don't we take this program? Because somebody said, why don't you guys go teach it for the whole county? And and before you know it, we're out there teaching. And the problem is when you start giving advice, like you said, Bobby, for shit you have no training or background in, that can be pretty dangerous, right?
It doesn't usually end well, so you're right, Ricky. It has to do with firefighting. It has to do with all kinds of things. And it doesn't mean that you can't have an opinion about it, right? It doesn't mean that you shouldn't, I don't care if you got 5 seconds on the job. You've got your right to your opinion about how you view the job or what you know at that point. And you may know a great deal, but I want to drag Scotty in here because he's been so quiet. You're making me nervous, Scotty.
No, I'm right on. And personally, we were talking before the show started. I mean, I'm struggling with that right now. I'm in a transition period of my life, getting old, Bobby achieving that goal. But, one of the coolest things, Rick, working for Louisville is that we were very active division chiefs. We're on call. We're going out with the first alarm. And when the truck was running we were making a lot of fires. If you were on call, you were going to go to a fire. And so you had to stay current, and now I don't have the time to be out training like I want to. I want to go out there and do some of my FDIC hands-on stuff and, kind of show that I can. Huh?
But you're running a fire department.
Well, right. And so you lose that over time. I mean, I find even now just, I'm not as comfortable talking on the radio because you don't kind of do it. But, and you mentioned a hazmat thing, I haven't been on a hazmat rig in years. And while I still think I'm educated and knowledgeable, but, I just got done reading the book, The Death of Expertise. And it's a great book. I liked it. Opened my eyes.
Another Greek guy that Bobby talks about, expertise.
Yeah. But it challenges you to look at yourself. And I can recall, I mean, I was probably 22 years, 23 years in on the job before things really kind of started to make sense, where I could see a little, the fog of war or fog of fire was kind of dissipating a little. And so, but now somebody learns something and they pass it on. They don't do the work to understand it, they analyze the information and then try to prove some of that wrong. I mean, I think that's the greatest test is challenge your beliefs. And then, I use the word emotion-based opinions. These people that say vertical ventilation is too dangerous. Well, it's dangerous. It's pretty scary, but there's not any real data out there that says it's not a risk worth taking in certain situations, if everything's coordinated. But and vetting people, how long, have we gone to these leadership conferences and you're listening to a chief, and I say, man, this is a chief officer, and I took in everything that he or she said, and find out it's Camp Run Amok back home.
You know what's funny, Scott, is that and my son and I kind of got in this little debate the other day, because it's easy to pick up your phone. I can read Twitter. That's new. It's news because there's a something on Facebook or something on Twitter. You know, back in the day, in the old days, you know, news sources did a fantastic job of vetting information. There was 3 credible sources. They weren't linked. They weren't. So when you read stuff at some point in time, it had some element of being fact checked. It had some element of somebody did their homework. Nowadays, everything's a race, and everything is, oh, I saw this, so now I am. Therefore, because I read 10 words on Twitter, I'm now an expert and can render an opinion on that. What I told my son, and what I was trying to impress upon him, was do some homework. And I don't care. I don't care if you're talking about what air pressure you should run in your tires, or you know, what kind of gasoline is best, or whether the United States should invest money to go to Mars. Do some research, read some opinions, educate yourself. And that's where I think a lot of people in a lot of areas, healthcare is no different. We want the fastest way possible to get, and oftentimes, which I think is really unfortunate, is we want the best news we can get. And so, you know, if you go to somebody, go, you know, I've been having this pain here in my, you know, it's probably a kidney stone, it'll pass. Well, that's a hell of a lot better than somebody going, hey, dude, that could be cancer. You better get that checked out. And so, you know, I think that across the board and everything we do, and I see it in the fire service, because I would much rather go see someone. If it was a medical doctor, I'd much rather see a medical doctor, and every now and then have that medical doctor say, you know what, I don't know, versus them tell me every single, oh yeah, you know, that's right. That's a Johnson rod. You don't want to mess with that thing. You know, I would rather somebody go, you know what, I don't know, I've never heard of that before, but let me look into that, because the other guy scares me.
And then where it gets dangerous, though, is then everybody wants to add their little touch to it, because, right, then I'm an expert because I've changed it from this to that. I've coined a new phrase, and now everybody's, you know, going to look at me as I originated this school of thought. And that's where it gets dangerous. You're not even really regurgitating. Now you got to improve it a little bit. And that's when the train comes off the track, I think.
Well, and Scott, exactly. Bobby and I were talking about that yesterday when we talked about using his editor's opinion as a topic for today. And one of the things, Bobby, you and I have talked about before, big difference when, you know, you and I were chiefing next to each other, you know, and Terry and Scott, you've got it set up that way. When we had a problem, when we went to a call or we had an incident, it was very easy. Let's just talk a stress-related call, to pick up the phone and call Brother Benny, a pastor, a educated, degreed, college, all that stuff, pastor, okay, a pastor that is trained. One of his many areas of training is how to deal with grief and how to deal with, you know, and right, we call, and Terry and Scott, how many times did Benny, it was like, I always call it that unknown miracle. They know that the 3 of us were calling, going, hey, can you stop by Threes? They had a bad baby call. You know, Tommy has got a son about that. And he would just kind of write, hey, Pastor, what's up, Brother Benny? Oh, what's going on? He'd have a glass of tea. And next thing you know, he was kind of.
And we had Wendy, and we have Steve Calvert, and we have, you know, Father Jim Stalwart, and even, you know, Father John Carney. Pick up the phone. That's what these guys do. They're grief counselors, basically.
Yeah, they deal with this stuff. You know, Benny used to write. He used to go to the hospital all the time, Terry. He was on call as the pastor to go there with families that either had a death or something serious or whatever. And that's what they do. And kind of let's, you know, like me, Bobby, I've told you before, you know, writing for you and sitting on the committees and that, I'm not going to try and push something to you from me that I'm not just trained in, that I know backwards and forwards. And John brought up something, and I think you and I were talking about, Bobby, was, you know, and if he gets on it, that's great. If not, I understand. He's like, you know, just because I attempt suicide doesn't make me an expert in that area. You know, it means you went through a bad, and my comment was, and I think you agreed, Bobby, was, look, if Bobby and Rick 20 years ago, we had a drinking problem, and we got someone intervened, someone told whatever, and we went to AA. And we went to AA and we're fine. And 10, 15 years later, you and I are running the AA meetings now. And for 10 years, we've been running, I don't know if you'd call it the host or whatever, you know what I'm saying? You're running the AA meeting. I think I'd be okay listening to Bobby, who's been running that meeting for 10 years, than someone that said, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I guess my thing is that you said for years, street cred. Well, I think street cred applies to the people we're seeking help from, besides just the training topic.
So Ricky's point is great. If you went through a really dark period and you thought about taking your own life, and then you went and did homework and research and got trained in peer support and all that good stuff, just like if you went through a dark period with alcohol or gambling or sex or anything else, then you went through recovery and learned about how to help others and became part of a group that does it. Like, there are some great peer support groups out there. You got the folks in Illinois, you've got the folks in North Carolina, but those folks train people to know where the rumble strips are. In other words, you just don't go out and do this stuff. You've got to you've got to go to seminars like Jim Bernicker puts on. You got to go to places with guys like Dan DeGrice, who are going to, sit down and tell you, okay, it's okay to do that. It's not okay to do that. You stay here, you stay there. And,
Right.
and it's interesting. So there's a natural human inclination among men and women like us, firefighters, to want to help people. And which is interesting, because some of the greatest minds in the history of mankind, whether it's Viktor Frankl, or Rick's going to hate this, but even if you go all the way back to Pericles, and Pericles was a Greek general. And
I don't hate that.
And he didn't actually write this down, but he said it, and we know he said it because a guy named Thucydides recorded these words. He said, "We secure our friends not by accepting favors from them, but by doing them." And so he didn't mean that we gain their indebtedness. What he meant by the word secure in Greek was that we build a foundation, we support them, we make them more whole. Security is the first of all human needs, right? We need to feel
Maslow's
secure.
pyramid, right?
Yeah, and Pericles knew it long before Maslow. I mean, it goes all. Maslow came to the party, about 1,500 years after Gilgamesh, and almost 4,500 years after Gilgamesh. But anyway, it's a known, and that's called ancient wisdom. To Terry's point, right? And what's important about ancient wisdom, and whether you go to parables in the Bible, or whether you go to the Book of Wisdom, or whether you go to the Quran, or whether you go to, Buddha, or whether you go to, Gilgamesh, Beowulf, the earliest writings. The reason why that stuff is really wisdom is it has endured, right? An ounce of prevention. That's a proverb. An ounce of prevention's better than a pound of cure. We sweat on the battlefield so we don't bleed, we sweat in training so we don't bleed on the battlefield. All of that ancient wisdom is important, which is where, to Terry's point, if some knucklehead on a podcast on, YouTube blabbed something, that's not wisdom, right? And if you're subscribing to a social theory that has, that was concocted by a couple of French guys trying to validate Marxism, good luck with that, right? And I mean, you go back to the Council in Frankfurt in 1930, and they tried to validate all that, and then you had the postmodernist movement, and the guys like Chiller's. I've read Chiller's stuff, and there's some intelligent argument in there, but it's not a pathway for a way of life. It's great theory if you want to sit around and argue about navel gazing philosophically, right? There's nothing better than postmodernism, because it really has no purpose, fundamental principles, or anything that you can. It's pudding. It's intellectual pudding, and pudding can be fun to poke and watch it move around like Jello on the plate. I'm not putting down pudding, but it's not first principles. It's not a set of constructs that can lead towards a meaningful and relevant and purposeful life, which is what firefighters endeavor for. And so why I like that quote by Pericles is that I want every firefighter listening to this brief podcast, the 20 or 30 people who have taken the time to join us today, to do everything they possibly can whenever they're asked by anybody In other words, every time you have a chance to do something for somebody, the great American philosopher, Machete, Danny Trejo, owns a bunch of taco restaurants in LA. And he's over 70, he's 72, 73 years old. A car accident happened in front of one of his taco restaurants. Danny ran out, climbed under the car, helped to rescue a lady and her small child. And they asked him afterwards, why would you do that? You're Danny Trejo, you're a gazillionaire, you're a famous actor, you're Machete, for goodness sakes. And he said, the best things that have ever happened to me when I was doing something for somebody else. And Danny wasn't doing it to gain notoriety. He wasn't doing it to get in the paper. Danny crawled into that upside down car where he could have gotten killed because he wanted to help that young lady who he didn't know. And it's exactly what every single one of you listening to this right now would do in a moment's notice, which is so interesting because another great American philosopher, Marine Colonel Greg Kelly, once said, it's easy to find soldiers willing to risk their lives for their country, but not their careers.
Well, and Bobby, what you're saying, and I want to throw this out there as another disclaimer, like you did. And Bobby, you've heard me say this plenty of times, and it's from my heart that, you know, I thank God quite often that I work for a company with a leader like you, and that's the whole fire engineering family, the whole group that, you know, Clarion, right, the fire rescue group and beyond, that actually embraces the whole thing that we're doing, cancer awareness now, and embraces the whole PTSD. We've had kids that have, you know, had their issues, and it's real. And I love the fact that I've got a boss with fire engineering like you, Bobby, that, like I do, says it's okay to not be okay. It's okay. And the fact that we realize that firefighters, that's their MO. We've said it. We're always the problem fixers. That's what we want to do. That's our job. We take care of people. We get called for just about every kind of call we get called to. And a lot of times we're trying to figure out what we're going to do to help someone. And it's very easy to become, you know, like we were saying before, that Greek expert, you know, the Greek know-it-all expertise, you know, where you think that you have to, it's like a company officer thinks they have to know everything instead of admitting to their troops, like Terry said, the doctor, like, well, you know, I'm not sure. Let me do some research or whatever. So to the folks out there, like Bobby said, PTSD, in a lot of cases, that's real. That's a real thing. It's not normal for a firefighter to see what a firefighter sees. So like every one of us has said time and time again, thank God we're at a point where it's okay to not be okay to ask for help. Alcoholism, dependency, whether it's drugs or alcohol, whatever, is a serious thing. If you've never been addicted to anything, you have no idea what people say, why don't you just quit smoking? I've never smoked, but why don't you quit? Well, it's a lot easier to say that than it is to do it. So be patient and show some empathy when you see somebody going through it. Don't turn your back on them. But this is the time, right, Bobby, maybe to go, you know, Terry, I'm glad we're talking, bro. You know, having that table talk or whatever, where you realize Terry's, did you ever think about getting with the EAP, man? Talking to someone, you know, well, yeah, you know, it's confidential. How about we call together? How about we get, you know, let's get someone in the circle, like a Dr. Sarah Lepaka, who is degreed and credentialed and experienced. And that's her whole life. That's her profession, is helping people and stuff. Not the fact she just put a PowerPoint together.
So, and it's really important to remember too. So as firefighters, we don't tend to ascribe motive to people for doing things. Like, in other words, it would be ludicrous to us to say somebody goes to a fire and it didn't turn out the way they hoped it would, you know, something bad happened, or, you know, whatever. We don't say, oh, they did that intentionally. But that's becoming very popular in American culture today, to ascribe motives. In other words, they wanted those people to get hurt, or they wanted to be mean or bad or whatever. So real quickly, I know some folks might not remember, but about 22 years ago, 1998, the United States Navy decided to use a guided missile cruiser to patrol the Strait of Hormuz. Now, guided missile cruisers generally don't do that. They're generally out at sea because of the nature of that piece of machinery and its primary mission. So Captain Will Rogers was in command that day, and he was a decorated officer, extremely talented. The crew was extremely talented, really great. So they recognized they had been harassed by some Iranian fighter planes during this particular cruise, and another one starts coming at them, or so they thought. It matched all of the previous kind of deals. So long story short, they fired a missile and they shot it out of the air. It turned out to be a civilian aircraft, an Airbus, an Iranian civilian aircraft. And I think 109 people were killed that day. Now, Captain Rogers and his crew never wanted to hurt anybody, but the pattern matched in their minds exactly what the threat had been previous. And the captain and good crew were just defending themselves. The captain was defending his crew and the crew was defending the ship. And so, but it had a horrible outcome. So even experts with all the latest technology and all the greatest devices and doctors and everyone else can make errors. Errors happen, and it doesn't make them bad or evil, and it doesn't make them culpable. What it means is they made a mistake. And trust me, I probably have made more mistakes than anybody who's listening to my voice right now ever possibly could. And I've learned from a couple of them, not from all of them, because a lot of them I've repeated, and we all have. I got a buddy, Ruben Collado in New Mexico. I hope he's listening. But every 2 or 3 years, he finds some woman he can't stand. He buys her a house. And so repeating mistakes is, and I've got female friends who've done the same thing. You know, if you're in the Mickey Rooney Club with 8 and 10 marriages, maybe it's you, but that's another story. So we all make mistakes, and that's okay. So the point of the editorial was, in really, really, really dangerous situations where we have very little knowledge, it's important to lend support, but it's important to lend that support and get support for our support, if that makes sense. I'm probably not saying that well, but you can see a pattern, and everybody wants science-based stuff now. Everyone wants to be able to take a UL class and say, well, if you see this and you see this, then do this and do this. Well, good luck with that, you know, because that's not how the real world works. Remember, my good friend Pete, who's our boss on this particular hangout, Pete sent me a great quote the other day. He said, models are always wrong. I don't know who said it, but models are always wrong, but they're useful. And so we're not saying to not use history and models and all that good stuff. We're just saying that the model only tells you what's true for the model. And in instances where something as wickedly complex as mental health or someone's physical health, it's so important to be to have a great dose of humility first. And I just hope that this came across that way. I love peer support, and I love the people who do it. And I'm so grateful to my friends who've come forward and told their stories and put themselves out there and who are willing. I guess the point of the editorial was this. I met a guy years ago after a personal incident, and his name was Major General John Rossi. And Major General John Rossi ran the Army Suicide Prevention Program. And great program, saved tens of thousands of soldiers' lives. And he was a brilliant, sensitive, caring, decent guy. And he knew more about suicide intervention than just probably about anybody on the face of the planet. And inexplicably, a few years ago, he killed himself. So we got to stay in our lane, because we'll never know what drove the Major General to do that. And I'm sure his family, and somebody just quoted me to remind me, 290 people were killed in the Vincennes incident. I apologize, I said 190, it's 290. And thank you for correcting me. But we need to support one another, and we need to be there for one another. But just because something looks like something doesn't mean that that's what it is.
Well, and Bobby, we talked, as well about, and John's with us. He made it back. John, I told him you're on a run. You're muted, buddy. But we talked about that, where being there for each other is huge. And I'll take offense, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, and I'll say it if I am. I'll agree to it. When I see somebody say, the fire service is failing us, and I kind of take issue with that. I've seen it before. I've seen pictures and drawings and different things where the fire service is failing. How are we failing? I'm like, I don't think the fire service is failing us. I think we as individuals can fail each other. That you and Bobby and I talked about. We're, like Terry said, even going back to when they vetted, if you will, some news reports or whatever. There used to be a time, where, we paid attention to each other. We were the brothers and sisters in the fire service that we say we are. And we paid attention to each other at the kitchen table, and we paid attention because, I said before, it's not normal to see what goes on in the fire service, but it's also a stressor to be going through a divorce, to have a kid that's got problems or whatever. And we're so busy with our phones that we miss and Bobby, you and I talked about this, right? And John, how many times have I said this in class? I've said, who has a kid? They raise their hand. All right, who doesn't have a kid? Good. You don't have to have a kid to answer this. What are the signs you see when someone else's child is traveling down the wrong path in life? And everybody goes, yeah, their clothes change, their attitude, their school, their their grades go down, blah, 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 all the things, right? We all could talk about the things that kind of, pop out there. I go, you don't even have to have a kid to notice that, but how do we miss it with each other? How do we miss that, God, Bobby was like, God, for the past 10 years, he's if he's not here an hour before his shift, we're calling the hospital, and his uniform was crisp, and he was just, when did we notice that he's not shaving, his uniform is crap? We have to call him and wake him up to come to work. And, and I guess that's where I'm going at, John, is I think we've kind of forgot to pay attention to each other. And as bosses and as company officers and chiefs.
I got to
go
well,
ahead.
My parents knew I was going down a bad road when I started hanging out with Salka.
Listen, you were never so lucky to hang out with me, pal. I've never had handcuffs on. I've never done any drugs. I've never been arrested. Now, you repeat that. Can you?
I can, but I'd have to say I have had handcuffs on. I have been arrested.
Anyway,
I'd have to take take the knots out.
This Central Time, Eastern Time stuff is just bullshit. Okay, so sorry for being late. Let me get back to what Rich just said. And when did we start failing our guys? When we started, I'm sorry, I might have missed it. Some of this stuff might have been said already. But when we started building Holiday Inns for firehouses, when guys started getting their own little bunk room to hang out in all night long, and nobody's eating together because they got their own room and they're on an ABC diet or a CFD diet, or, everybody's so busy living their little lives in little cubicles that suddenly, not that this would solve the problem, but it's certainly one thing that's taken away that little group dynamics that we always had in the firehouse. It was always like you came in, you with the same 5 guys for 24 hours in a dining room, in a TV room, sleeping upstairs, going on runs. It was like you got tired of them after 24 hours. Now, if these guys don't get a run, they don't even know who they were working with, So I mean, that's not helping either, I don't think.
Well, and you get people real quick, they'll say, well, we have to have, not to make this into a fire station design podcast, but we have to have individual cubicles because we have female firefighters. And I'm like, really? Your guys are that blatant? And that's what I hear, Bobby. And I'll sit there and I'll go, and you guys know this. And for those of us that do consulting, when we go and help departments fix stuff, we have bigger problems with little cubicles with closed doors than we did when we had a bunk room with the sneeze walls. You know what I'm saying? But you're right, John. When we don't eat together, we've said this. When families, Bobby, I know how every one of us, how we cherish family, right? And our kids and the family. When we don't break bread together, we don't eat together, we don't sit at the kitchen table at the firehouse together. When we don't, when we're not doing stuff, you miss things. And that's my thing is how do you, this guy or gal can be going through all kinds of crap at home, has nothing to do with the fire department. That's why I said when people put labels on the fire services failing people, you think the whole fire service? I don't buy that. What I do buy is we miss it with each other. I missed something. Bobby sitting across from me for 6 years at the kitchen table, and I'm not up and conscious enough to notice that he's not the same, you know what I mean by the same Bobby. Scott, you and I have talked about this. We had a guy in Louisville. Remember, you were doing a training session, and I'm looking at a picture on the wall of a rescues mate, and God, this athlete, all this stuff. And he walked by me and go, coffee. And I went, and I looked at the picture. I looked at him. I go, this is like a before and after for a bad drug. Remember? And I asked the captain. I said, so is there anything I should know about so and so? He goes, well, yeah, we've been doing that for about a year, and we got to go wake him up. I'm like, we have professionals that do this stuff. Yet we're kind of enabling them, right?
Well, it goes back to denial, Rick, and before Scott jumps in very quickly, especially in the area of mental health, it's very difficult because when you're in love with somebody, and we're in love with the men and women we work with, in the most plain language, or your children, we often hear, "Oh, we didn't see the warning signs." It's incomprehensible to the family and friends of people who've committed suicide that they could have ever thought about it often. And that's not uncommon. Just speaking personally, you don't see that stuff in the people you love. You can't, your head can't go there because you love them, and your head can't go there. So, maybe when you're working with someone, you can see work patterns. I can see that. But when you're really, truly in love with someone, a child or a family member, or sometimes the people you work with, love is blind. That's a true thing. And the last place your mind would ever go is that they're going to hurt themselves. I'm just saying.
Right.
That's true.
And that's why I said sometimes, like to John's point about the cubicles, which not to belabor that, but you're not going to notice what, yeah, there are things people can mask, and there are things, like you say, Bobby, your feelings could kind of blind you from that stuff. But man, all it takes is Terry one time to look at Rick and go, "Hey, Scott, what's wrong with you? Well, you didn't hear, oh God, and all of a sudden you find out that his kid, is on drugs. John, you said it. The kid's on drugs. This is going on. He's out of his mind trying to figure out what's going on at home. That's what I'm talking about. When we don't even sit together, talk, hang together, whatever, you miss. I think you can miss some things, and it only takes it maybe out of 5 guys. Not everybody's going to notice them, but all it takes, right, Bobby or John, one guy to notice that there's something off with Rick, to be able to go, "Hey, Terry, did you notice this?" And maybe, there's a time for someone to say, "Hey, how you doing, kid?" And, point you in the right direction if need be or whatever. But John, go ahead. Oh, I thought you had something. Okay, Scott.
No, I'm a huge believer in, and I'll call it a formal roll call, but in the morning, I think that's a great time. I think it's the best time for the officer to consistently practice leadership, but it's for sure at least one time during the shift, if you're making calls, missing meals, that everybody can sit down and kind of evaluate everybody at that point from shift to shift to shift, and start to realize when there is maybe somebody who is not being themselves. And it's also a good time to write to come back and say, "Hey, how's your kid doing? You had this problem going on," and checking the mental preparedness, if you will, of everybody on the crew. And that's such an easy thing to do. And I think company officers that don't take the time to have that quality, whatever it looks like, but a quality roll call, are giving away their leadership to a huge degree. And I just think that's super important, and get everybody started off saying, "Hey, let's kind of look out for one another," however that message sounds, that success is imminent message, and get started and keep everybody in their lane and move forward throughout the tour of duty.
Well, to play on that, Scott, we just talked about the cubicles and being able to hide and people not see, and not the lack of interaction, like John said. You just made a great point. There's company officers that hide their office. John, how many times we talked about that, where we said once in a while we talk about being a supervisor, AKA, I guess that's the fancy term. You're the babysitter. Your job is to take care of your people, and you're not going to notice shit if you're hidden in your office all the time. The only time you come down is when there's something to eat or there's a call, right? Have we talked about that? If you're not involved with your people?
And I just want to add one thing real quick again, and especially if what Scott just said and what Rick just said, and they're both valid. Like you said, that official roll call and eyeing everybody up and everybody eyeing each other up and seeing how things are going, making a quick evaluation. Or even what I just said, everybody hanging out together rather than hanging around, in their own little areas. And having said that, now I want to sort of call it all nonsense, because I think when we're talking, not every issue that we're talking about here, but let's look at suicide in particular, right? How many times have you seen or heard either stories or accounts of a suicide, whether it's a firefighter or a police officer or a military, where every single person who knew, and Bobby, who loved and worked with the guy, not one of them said, oh man, I knew something was wrong. Every single one of them said, no, you're kidding me. That would be the last guy I thought. He was so happy. He was the leader of the pack. He was the... I think actual suicide, and I know nothing about it, so let me go on the record about that. I think that is about 5 orbits above all of our little fire department leadership stories, and those are all very important things, and they're all really important for the survival of the fire service and for the leadership topic and building good teams and having effective organizations. But I think when you say that word suicide, that is a space shuttle away. That is 5 orbits above anything we do in the firehouse. And whatever was talked about before I got here, it's all true, Bobby. You got to stay in your lane. Most of the people in the fire service, and I don't know anybody else anywhere else, but most of the people in the fire service talking about suicide they have 0 professional qualifications or training in that field. They're caring, great people that are trying to save brothers and sisters and love the job and love their crew and love. But you know what? That doesn't cut it. That doesn't cut it. That's like hiring a guy that runs the bakery down the block to give a seminar on forcible entry. Even if he really loves his firefighter friends and everything else, he just can't teach about forcible entry. And I think unless you're a suicide or unless you're a trained mental health professional, I don't think you should be writing articles or establishing programs or giving advice to people about this at all. I think you should only be expressing words of support when things happen and urging people to get professional help when they can, if they think they need it. I wouldn't even venture to say that I would know when somebody should get help. I mean, you might know when somebody's not right, but it just might be that they had a pissing match with their girlfriend or with their wife at home, or their kid ran away. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I hope I'm not blowing the whole thing up, but it just seems like that's such a really technical, professional topic that some people are just dabbling in, I think, erroneously.
But John, it's exactly what Bobby let off saying is in the whole stay in your lane. Whether it's what we talked about before you came on was the guys that want to teach company officer classes, never been a company officer. They want to teach this, they've never done this. Like, don't teach something that you're not trained or qualified to teach it. Terry, you got something, buddy?
No, I was just I think what Chief Salka's referencing is if somebody were to come to me and say, man, I'm really struggling with something, I'll drive you somewhere. I'll help you make phone calls. But I am not about to sit down and pretend that I can talk you through this. And kind of gets back to a little bit what we alluded to earlier in the show, which is just because you read something somewhere doesn't make you an expert. Because your 5th cousin removed next door neighbor had a circumstance that you heard about doesn't make you an expert. And I think it's almost as important to have the skill set to be able to step back and go, whoa, I don't know anything about that, as it is to be able to walk up and force a door like you designed it, because you've put a tremendous amount of effort, resources, and knowledge and skill, and you've perfected a skill or a trade. That doesn't go across the board. I do want to weigh in on, talking about people in a fire station and a little bit about, when Bobby says, that love is blind, or you don't want to see things. It's hard to see things. You don't ever envision the worst out of somebody that you look through probably a clouded lens of somebody that you care or love. But that normalcy of deviance, or if that applies to this situation. But there are times, Chief, that I've seen people, a firefighter, maybe I haven't seen him in 3 months, and all of a sudden I look out there and then I'm like, oh, hey, is that Joe? What's going on with him? Because that doesn't look like the last time I saw him or the last 3 times I've seen him. Maybe I hear bits and pieces of people say, man, did you see or did you hear? But you talk to the people that are in a house with him, living with him, and you oftentimes get the answer of, oh yeah, man, that's him. He's just dealing with some stuff. But because they've been getting it small bites at a time, they've been kind of numbed to the fact that all of a sudden I see him 3 months later and I'm thinking, no, man, the train left the tracks on this deal. This guy, something's wrong with him. And I think they see it just a little bit at a time. And so all of a sudden it's normal. That's his new normal. And so, and I think there's a lot of that. And then I think that part of the family dynamics here is it's hard to have a conversation, and it's hard to sit down, or everybody's got to be politically correct. And God forbid you should ask somebody some HIPAA related question or whatever the case may be. But to look somebody in the eye and go, dude, are you okay? Yeah, no, I'm fine. Nothing's going on. And you go, hey, bullshit. We're talking right here. But I think there's not enough of that goes on.
So can I just take a point of privilege for a moment here? I apologize. I've got a full-time job and I've got to be on another meeting for the people that pay me money to be here. So I apologize. I have to run and I didn't want to leave unexpectedly. And you guys please continue. Two things. My good friend Bill Carey just shot out a note too, saying, not everybody's going to be like everybody else. And one of the things about talking about all this trauma and affect and effect is that people can start looking to this. People can start thinking that because they're not having problems, that they must have a problem. Sometimes it's okay to be okay. I mean, if you're doing fine, good for you. We don't have to all have issues. I mean, lots of us have no issues at all. I mean, and that's okay too. It's okay to be okay. I mean, and I think that's what Bill was trying to say. Bill says that too much woe can cause us to go looking for something to be wrong or to be normal like everybody else. So no, I mean, like, we're not saying everybody's got issues. Everybody's got stuff going on in their lives. Doesn't mean you're not dealing with it just absolutely perfectly fine. And so thank you, Bill, for sending that in. And also thank you to Zach Hawk for putting in a thing about, how much training matters because it keeps people connected and just doing stuff, right? So I'm going to leave, but my point was, we have to be there for each other all the time. Somebody asks you to move the couch. If you can move the couch, move the damn couch. Somebody asks you to, give them a hand with something, go give them a hand. If you can. If you can't, okay, you can't. Let them know. Be honest about it. But don't lie to them. And if you just don't want to do it, just tell them you don't want to do it. Somebody says, hey, can you give me a hand with your truck Tuesday? Say, no, I'm going fishing. That's okay too. Sometimes you got to do stuff for yourself. So that was kind of my point. And my point was that, there's nothing like the firefighters. There's nothing like the community that we've built. There's nothing like being a part of the fire service because, man, it's like the best damn job any of us have ever had. It's the best damn life a person could hope for. And so I love it. And I love everything about it. I've never met a firefighter I didn't like. They've pissed me off from time to time, but it doesn't mean I didn't like them. So I got to run. I apologize, but I hope one of the things I got a note from a friend of mine the other day who I believe Carly Simon was singing in the background. You're so vain. You probably think this song is about you. If you read that editorial and you thought I was writing about you, I wasn't. I wasn't writing about anybody in particular. So don't send me a letter saying, my friend actually said, I wish you'd called me first. I'm like, I wasn't even thinking of you.
I use the phrase, a thief marks his own tools first. If you feel a wee bit guilty, then maybe you are a wee bit guilty. So Bobby's editorial, as editor's opinion was, I know you speak in general, the whole fire service, not on any one individual. And that, obviously we're not talking about any one individual.
No, If you think I was talking about you, check your ego at the door. Cause I wasn't, it was just a general thought. And so
Bobby, I know you got to run. We're going to go for a couple minutes longer, but
you guys keep going. Hey, I just want to say Merry Christmas to everybody. I don't do Facebook. So if you're Facebooking me, I'm deactivating my Facebook stuff. I'm getting off that platform.
Why?
Because I think it's a highly corrupt platform, and I don't like their business practices. I don't like being tracked without my knowledge. I don't like the way they handle themselves. I don't like the way they censor people. I don't like Facebook. So I'm not participating in Facebook any longer. So it's a personal choice. I find it offensive. I find it anti-American. I find it I find it to just be an awful place. So Bill Gates, if you're listening, or who runs it? Zuckerberg. I think you're a knucklehead. Probably a nice kid, but a knucklehead. So
He's going to be on our next show. So
yeah, if you're having him on the next show, it's probably a decent guy to have a cup of coffee with. But
Have a good one, Bobby. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Bobby.
Merry Christmas. God bless you all. See you on the other side.
Thanks, Bobby. Well, a couple points here, guys, as we're talking about. So we're going to, and Bobby and Pete have always let us go a little bit longer. You know, one of the things I just want to get back to before we close things out today is something that, you know, Terry was talking about is, you know, and I agree, you know, I personally had another member of my department call me who had a gun and was talking about killing himself. And I worked very hard while I had him on the phone to talk him out of it, but also to get him the help, right? I mean, I know one of my officers where I was a chief did the same thing for another firefighter who was driving around, you know, in his truck. His wife had called and said, he's got a gun. He's got, you know, now we're not, when I talk about that, if there's a way, if you notice something about somebody, not just that, something, by all means, do what you can to be there for them and help them, just like every one of us has said, to be there for them. The whole thing with Bobby talking about stay in your lane, yeah, it pertains to FDIC classes and what you do at work and so forth. But, you know, it also means whether it's this whole cancer thing and the whole, you know, PTSD thing, those are true and genuine and real things. And I like the way he said it, guys. And John, you said it as well. You know, these are good, caring, thoughtful people that want to make a difference in other people's lives. You know what I'm saying? And I think quite often the fire service, our knack for wanting to fix up people's problems, we take things to an extreme. I've always said it's like a communication problem or labor problem of the fire department. It's like an acid spill. You know, they're down here, right? And they're an acid spill. And they keep throwing neutralizer. When they get to 7.0, they're neutral. They don't stop. They keep going, and it goes from an acid to a base, one spill to another. It's the guys that took the RIT packs, John, years ago that we came up with and added all the crap to them. And nobody came up and said, hey, Chief Salka, I got a great idea how I can weight down the RIT pack. I have a great idea. I can put a whole bunch of, you know, I got a great idea on how I can screw up a Mayday policy. Let's make them change channels. None of those people did that to screw things up. They did it because they thought they were helping. And I think some of the people that may not necessarily stay in their lane, good intentions that kind of are running amok, as you would say, right? We've left the rails to where we left the lane, you know, and again, God bless you if you're helping people and you're doing your things. Know your resources. We've said it before. Talk about PTSD. Does your department have an EAP? If they do, where do your people get the phone number? John, how many times we asked that in class? Where do you keep the phone number? It's on a bulletin board at the firehouse, on the door. Why is it not on your phone? You got the phone number to the Chinese restaurant, to the Italian pizza place. Why not to the EAP? Because 9 times out of 10, when you've got a buddy or a shiftmate you're talking to, you're going to be off duty. And you go, well, hang on a second. Terry, hang on. Let me call up to the station and get the phone number. Well, they're out on a call or whatever. Instead of saying, I've got the number, how about we call together? You know what I'm saying? Take an interest in your people, break bread together, have lunch, you know, train together, talk together, be there for each other. Company officer, don't hide in your office. Get out with your people when you can. You know, firefighters, you know, if you have a firehouse where you have the cubicles, that's fine. When you go to bed, you go to bed. But the quality time still needs to be there. So, hey, you know, if we're going to close this out for today, let's do our little roundtable, what we do here. Scott, we'll start with you. Closing thoughts on the whole staying in your lane thing.
I think we have a responsibility. You know, we've been given this platform to have these discussions once a month. And with that, people are going to look to us to provide good information, and they're going to trust that we're not going to shoot from the hip and be reckless. And I think we need to look across, you know, John, the fact that you're FDNY brings a certain amount of credibility, and people are going to trust what you say because of just that reputation. So I think it's got to kind of start there, is that we have to be responsible with the things that we say and the things that we do. And sometimes that, especially as chief officers, holding people accountable and making sure that people don't get out of their lane and connecting the dots, but also coach and mentor them to maybe get their message across in a way that is more fitting for their influence and helping them understand that. But, you know, it concerns me just how far people stray out of their lane. And I think I see that on a regular basis. And that can be very destructive. Sometimes it's harmless, but sometimes it can be very destructive. And so I would just close with that and just say that, you know, we all need to be responsible when we express our opinions and our thoughts, and realize that if because we're saying it, some people are going to say, well, that's got to be the way to go. So I'll just leave it at that. You can contact me at scott@fireserviceleadership.com, and great show.
Great. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Scott. John, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, pretty simple. You and I have talked about this before. We've probably said it before on other programs, and you know, stick to what you know. You know, you and I have both said that. All of us are instructors. All of us are officers. All of us have been in groups where we've run drills or training sessions, and I would feel totally inadequate and uneasy to teach anything that I had read rather than that I knew. You know, all of us restrict ourselves to stuff that we have great experience in and great knowledge about. And all I'm saying is I think that rule should apply across the board, whether you're talking about cancer or whether you're talking about suicide or any of the other difficulties that affect the fire service. If it's not your specialty, if it's not something you've got some considerable training in or certifications or qualifications, you know, Firehouse Kitchen should be the limit. You know what I'm saying? As far as you're discussing it, shouldn't get too far beyond that. I hate to limit people, but just in a nutshell, stick to what you know. Stick to what you really do know.
Perfect. T?
I mean, I think it's been said. There's a tremendous amount of weight and gravity in our words, and I think that's probably applies to anyone in relation to the circles that you run in. But you know, as Scott said, if you're given an opportunity like this to have these conversations, there are people that tune in to learn, and there are people that tune into you know, they might be offering counterpoints to everything that I say or hear, but there are also people that tune in and they'll take these words and use those to create action or to create a change, if you will, in their lives. And I think that's something that, you know, station officers need to know, firefighters need to know when you're talking to the public, when you're talking to each other, and you know, I often kind of believe that you should almost ask as many questions as you answer, because, you know, I think when you're walking into an environment that you feel like you've got all the answers, or you're certainly opinionated enough or vociferous enough that you're going to impose or put all that out there, it has a tremendous amount of impact on people, and you've got to be very, very cautious that whatever it is you're representing is accurate and appropriate. And you know, I think there's a tremendous amount of self-control that goes in with you know, with those spoken words, and those are my thoughts. And again, to reach me, I'm at City of Louisville. It's T McGrath at cityoflouisville.com.
Very good, John. We got you at Chief John Salka at gmail, right? .com.
Correct.
Okay. And it's, I think, you know, the common theme here as we close things out has been, you know, care about each other, take care of each other, be there for each other, you know what you could do for each other. But there's a lot of people out there that are truly experts in a particular field, whether it's a PTSD issue, a cancer type issue, whatever, you know, the classes that you want to teach and that whole end of things. Know your stuff before you put in, you know, to teach a class that you don't, on a topic you don't even do. You know, again, I truly think if you truly believe in this whole brother sister thing, this whole fire service family thing, you know, then you're doing some good things. Just, I think Bobby's keynote, Billy G put a thing out there, you know, his whole topic, the greatest advice I ever got. I apologize, Billy. Hang on one second. It is the best advice. The best advice I never got. And he put out a little thing, kind of the same thing about this whole staying in your lane. And we just thought, folks, that Bobby's editorial was perfect. It's not written about any one individual's program. We'll say that again. It's in general, just, know what you're talking about, know who you're dealing with, know where your resources are. Don't ever turn your back on a fellow firefighter where, like Bobby said, where they need a couch to be moved or they need to talk to someone about something going on in their life, and be that shoulder. And if you have to, push them in the right direction or give them the help they need. With that, guys, another good one. Hang on when we get ready to sign off here in a second. We'll keep everybody on for a second. We're all on social media, whatever your choices are, and the web. If you'd like to get a hold of us, just shoot over to one of those. Our next show date for this group, our cast of characters, the 5, is January 20th. We've got the third Wednesday of every month for our Humpday Hangouts. Fire engineering, we say this every time, always has some great hangouts. Wednesdays at noon Central, 1 o'clock Eastern, with some awesome people, just like the nighttime podcast that Pete's putting out there, the live and recorded. Great stuff with a lot of people. So catch some of those. In closing, we always ask you at the end of all our shows to please keep the men and women, our armed forces, in your thoughts and prayers. Remember, never forgetting means just that, never forgetting. Thanks a lot. Be safe. God bless you. Have a very safe and great holiday.
Good night.